In today's episode, I want to lift up a few of the challenges facing us as a culture as articulated by author David Brooks, with the hope that maybe we can do something about it. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. Pastor Tim Westermeyer here, Senior Pastor of St. Philip Deacon in the western suburbs of Minneapolis. Good to be with you as always. I have a few things on my mind today, all of them in some ways, well, the first two of them, I guess, connected to this book, which I know I've been prattling on about over the last 2 or 3 episodes, but it is so good. If you do nothing else and want to stop this episode right now and go out and buy it and just read it, I would commend it to you. Listen to the podcast interview I mentioned with David Brooks. Again, the book is How to Know a Person, The Art of Seeing Others Deeply and Being Deeply Seen. So the first reason I'm thinking about this is that we had a staff retreat the day before I'm taping this, and we used portions of the book to help sort of frame up our conversation, and I'll get to that in a second. But I just want to pause, having just had that staff retreat, to celebrate again the incredible group of faithful people who I have the privilege of working with here at St. Philip Deacon. We spent about a half day together. We had lunch. It was an opportunity to just sort of reflect on where we find ourselves in the culture, where God is leading us, and it's sort of an ongoing conversation that we will be continuing in the months ahead. But boy, what a wonderful day. And again, I want to pause to say to everyone I work with, thank you for being you. Thank you for the faithfulness you bring. Thank you for the creativity you bring. Thank you for the collegiality you bring to this place. It's just, it's an incredible blessing to work alongside all of these wonderful people. And I want to pause right now just to say that out loud. So I also, having used this book, or parts of the book as a framing device, I want to read again from it today, in part to invite your comments or reflections or reactions to it. And I will tell you, part of what I did in yesterday's retreat is I lifted up, and I said this openly and honestly to our staff, I lifted up a lot of depressing statistics that Brooks lifts up in the book, just as a way to remind us of the world we live in today, the culture we're part of, and to be honest about some of the challenges we face. And I'm not going to go through that litany of things here. I am going to lift up a couple of readings kind of related to it, I guess. But it is really important, I think, that we understand those challenges. And for me, at least, I wouldn't say any of the challenges were shocking or surprising, but Brooks helped to talk about them in ways that allowed me to sort of see them a little more clearly, I guess might be the best way to say it. So again, let me read one thing that sort of sums up some of the ways we might think of our culture today. And then I'm going to read 2 other things which I would love you to reflect on, or I'd love your input on whether you agree with them or not. So this is the first thing I'll read is from the end of a chapter called, it's from part 2, I See You in Your Struggles, The Epidemic of Blindness. And it's the very final chapter of that, paragraph of that chapter. In short, he writes, several generations were not taught the skills they would need in order to see, understand, and respect other people in all their depth and dignity. The breakdown in basic moral skills produced, and here's this part of a litany, disconnection, alienation, a culture in which cruelty was permitted. Our failure to treat each other well in the small encounters of everyday life metastasized and, I believe, led to the horrific social breakdown we see all around us. This, he writes, is massive civilizational failure. We need, he writes, to rediscover ways to teach moral and social skills, and this crisis helped motivate me to write this book. So if you want to comment on that, feel free. It's a pretty strong statement. I think he is correct, though. But then the thing I would particularly invite your input on is he talks in one still same section, I guess it's the same chapter actually, still in the epidemic of blindness. He talks about the way politics has consumed everything in our world today. And by saying that, I'm going to say I'm not trying to be political. I'm trying to state what is, I think, an objective fact about the world we live in. So again, he sort of offers up two different understandings of how politics works. One in a healthy culture and society, and then one in an unhealthy culture and society. And again, as he wrote about this, for me, it was helpful to sort of name it and articulate it and see it with a little more clarity. And he's just gone through, by the way, a section where he's talking about people who feel isolated and alone and how they tend, for reasons that aren't always positive, to be drawn into being active politically. But then he says this: over the past decade, everything has become politicized. And I don't think any of us would disagree with that. Churches, universities, sports, food selection, movie award shows, late-night comedy, they have all turned into political arenas, except, and this is the important point, this was not politics as it is normally understood. And here's where he has this sort of binary between healthy and unhealthy societies. Healthy societies, he writes, produce the politics of distribution. How should the resources of the society be allocated? Right? And I'm going to editorialize just for a second here. We're all in this together. We have challenges that we need to respond to. We have problems we need to solve. How are we going to do that? And by the way, people of goodwill can disagree about that, right? That's always been the case. But let's discuss it together and decide, okay, how are we going to respond to these challenges? How are we going to respond to these problems? How are we going to distribute the resources available to all of us, right? That, again, I'm editorializing, but I think that's his intent by talking about how healthy societies view politics. What about unhealthy societies? Unhappy societies, he writes, produce the politics not of distribution, but of recognition. Political movements these days are fueled largely by resentment, by a person or a group's feelings that society does not respect or recognize them. The goal of political and media personalities is to produce episodes in which their side is emotionally validated and the other side is emotionally shamed. And then this final sentence: the person practicing the politics of recognition, again, the politics as it is played out in an unhealthy society, is not trying to formulate domestic policies or to address this or that social ill. He is trying to affirm his identity, to gain status and visibility, to find a way to admire himself. Again, as I read that, and to be perfectly clear, I am not arguing here for one side or the other of the political spectrum. I think there's plenty of blame to be cast on both sides. His point is that in an unhealthy society, the way all sides of the political spectrum tend to operate is towards this politics of recognition. And so I guess my question for you is, does that resonate with you? Does that say something to you? And then importantly, and this is sort of where we're coming out of this staff retreat yesterday, and we are continuing to sit with that. If it does resonate, if that does sound accurate if that sounds accurate to you, how should we respond to that in a way that moves us away from that and creates a healthier kind of culture, society? And what in particular, for those of you who are part of a church, and maybe those of you part of St. Philip Deacon specifically, what might we do on that front? That's a genuine question. It's a difficult question. I don't have any of the answers this morning as I'm taping this, but I think it's an important question for us all to ask together. And if you have some thoughts about it, I would love to hear from you. So thank you for being with me as always. Be well, stay in touch, and God bless.